What if Jon Snow never joined the Night's Watch? Let's explore how differently the War of the Five Kings and the fate of Westeros could have unfolded in this epic scenario. Jon Snow stands in the courtyard of Winterfell as his father, Eddard Stark, prepares to depart for King's Landing. In the original timeline, this is the day Jon said his farewells and rode north to the Wall with his uncle Benjen to join the Night's Watch. But in our scenario, something stays his choice. Perhaps it's the sight of his younger brother Bran lying unconscious after a deadly fall, or a final conversation with his father Ned in the Godswood that changes his path. Ned, sensing the dangers ahead in the south, clasps Jon's shoulder and says, "There may come a day when Robb will need you. Stay with your brother for now. The Wall can wait." Jon, surprised but heartened by his father's words, decides not to take the Black, at least not yet. Instead, he will remain at Winterfell, bound by love for his family rather than by the vows of the Watch. This single choice sets off a cascade of changes. Ned Stark rides south to serve King Robert, taking his daughters Sansa and Arya with him, but leaving Jon in Winterfell alongside Robb, Bran, Rickon, and Catelyn. Jon still yearns for a purpose and resents his status as the bastard of Winterfell, but he throws himself into assisting Robb in running the castle. With Ned and the girls gone and Catelyn often by Bran's bedside, Robb, at only 15, carries the burden of acting Lord. Jon becomes his right-hand confidant instead of a distant brother sworn to the Watch. As summer fades, news from King's Landing grows ominous. King Robert's hand, Jon Arryn, is dead under suspicious circumstances. Eddard Stark uncovers secrets about Queen Cersei's children, secrets that put him in mortal danger. In Winterfell, ravens bring word of political turmoil. Jon hears that his father has confronted the Lannisters about the true parentage of Prince Joffrey. Tensions rise in the capital. Then the dire news arrives. Eddard Stark has been arrested for treason. Sansa writes a letter pleading that Robb come to King's Landing and swear fealty to Joffrey. But it's clear to the Starks that this letter was forced. Arya's whereabouts are unknown. Winterfell's Great Hall is filled with the gathered bannermen of the North, their voices echoing off stone walls as they debate the proper course. Robb, now declared Lord of Winterfell, calls his banners to war to rescue his father and sisters. Jon Snow stands by his brother's side as the Northern Lords meet. Some are wary of the bastard's presence in councils of war, but others recall his Stark blood and the direwolf he commands. Ghost, Jon's albino direwolf, has grown into a silent, swift hunter, often seen at Jon's heels. In one heated war council, Lord Greatjon Umber growls impatience at the thought of crossing the Twins to confront the Lannisters. When Robb insists they need the Freys Bridge and will have to negotiate, Greatjon bellows that if any man questions his loyalty, he'll pull their entrails out. Several northern lords reach for their sword hilts in alarm. Jon places a calming hand on Robb's shoulder. At that moment, Grey Wind, Robb's direwolf, springs forward, baring teeth at Greatjon's face. The hall falls silent as Grey Wind lunges and bites off two of Greatjon's fingers in a flash. Greatjon staggers back, cursing in pain. Jon's direwolf ghost stands ready at Grey Wind's side, a low growl emanating from his throat, eyes fixed on any who might challenge Robb. For a heartbeat, it seems blood will spill in the Stark Hall. But then Greatjon laughs, astonishing everyone, and says with begrudging respect, "Your wolf has more courage than half my army. The Greatjon will follow the young wolf." Laughter breaks the tension, and just like that, Robb Stark cements his command over the fierce men of the North, with Jon and the direwolves playing a key role in quelling dissent. Soon, 20,000 Northmen march south. Jon rides alongside Robb at the head of the column, the banners of House Stark flapping above them. Catelyn Stark departs Winterfell as well, leaving Bran, now awake but paraplegic, and young Rickon in the care of Maester Luwin and loyal guards. She intends to rally support from her father's house in the Riverlands and meet her son's host on the way. As Robb's army approaches the Twins, the only crossing over the green fork of the trident Lord Walder Frey finally agrees to open his gates. The notoriously prickly Walder has his price. He demands that Robb promise to marry one of his many daughters after the war as a condition for allowing the northern host safe passage. In the original timeline, Robb agreed, a decision that would later haunt him. Here, Robb once again consents under pressure, for he has little choice. "You have my word," Robb says solemnly in Lord Walder's crowded hall, unwilling to risk a feud with the Freys when his father's life is at stake. Jon eyes Lord Walder and his brood warily during the negotiations. Standing in the shadows with Ghost at his side, Jon senses the phrase's resentment at being needed but not respected. Jon leans to Robb after the meeting and murmurs, "We should tread carefully with these phrases. They feel insulted by years of slights. Honor your promise, Robb, for all our sakes." Robb, earnest and dutiful, nods, "I gave my word. I'll keep it." With the Frey Bridge secured, the Northmen cross into the Riverlands and join forces with Catelyn's uncle, Sir Brynden, Blackfish Tully, and the other river lords who are rising against Lannister aggression. At this point, news comes that the Lannisters hold Catelyn's brother Edmure and father Hoster Tully besieged at Riverrun, and that Jaime Lannister leads the host causing havoc in the Riverlands. Furthermore, word has it that Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, is marching with another Lannister force. Robb must decide how to fight two armies at once. In councils of war by flickering torchlight, Robb listens as his advisors debate strategy. Roose Bolton, Lord of the Dreadfort, suggests splitting their army, one part to face Lord Tywin's approaching forces head-on, and another to outmaneuver Jaime's army. Jon Snow watches Roose's pale eyes and expressionless face as he speaks. There's something about Lord Bolton that sets Ghost on edge. The direwolf stands behind Jon, fur bristling slightly whenever Roose enters the tent. Nonetheless, Robb and Catelyn accept Bolton's plan. Roose will take a portion of the army to hold the Green Fork of the Trident against Tywin's advance, while Robb leads the rest in a daring strike to lift the siege of Riverrun and capture Jaime Lannister. Thus, the northern host divides. As they part, Jon pulls Roose Bolton aside briefly. In his quiet, direct manner, Jon says, "The men trust you to hold that crossing. My brother is counting on you." Roose inclines his head with a thin smile. "The Lannisters will find no easy crossing, I swear it." His words are polite, but his eyes are unreadable. Jon remains uneasy as he watches Bolton's forces depart into the morning mist. Ghost chuffs, also uneasy, but Jon has more immediate concerns. He rides with Robb's column, forging hard for Riverrun by lesser-known roads through thick forests to avoid detection. One moonless night near the Whispering Wood outside Riverrun, Robb Stark's main force sets a trap for Jaime Lannister's army. It is an ambush illuminated only by faint starlight. Inside the besieged Riverrun, Edmure Tully is mounting a sortie to distract the Lannisters, just as Robb planned. Jaime Lannister, confident after months of raiding and burning, rushes with a part of his knights toward what he thinks is the main Stark army arriving to break his siege, but it's a feint. Jaime doesn't realize he's galloping into the jaws of a hidden direwolf. In the dark quiet of the Whispering Wood, Robb's scouts and outriders, guided by Grey Wind and Ghost, have encircled Jaime's position. Jon and a hand-picked group of men lie in wait among the mossy trees above the road, Ghost crouched at Jon's side like an alabaster shadow. They can hear the creak of leather and the clink of armor as the Lannister outriders approach below. Jon's heart hammers in his chest. This will be his first true battle. He grips his sword and whispers a command to Ghost to stay until needed. At Robb's signal, a sudden blast of a horn, the still night erupts into chaos. Northern men spring from cover with war cries on their lips. Horses rear and scream. Grey Wind launches himself out of the darkness, knocking a Lannister man-at-arms from his saddle and tearing his throat out in one savage bite. Amid the confusion, Jaime Lannister finds himself surrounded by Stark bannermen. The young wolf himself, Robb, slashes through Jaime's personal guard in a whirlwind of swordplay. Jon, staying true to his brother's orders, focuses on containing the enemy rather than seeking personal glory. He and a knot of men block the road behind Jaime's force, cutting off escape. Ghost darts among the trees, hamstringing horses and harrying panicked knights. Jaime Lannister shows why he's called one of the most skilled swordsmen alive. Even in ambush, he fights ferociously. Robb confronts him, and they trade a series of rapid blows, Robb's blade versus Jaime's gleaming sword. Jaime knocks Robb from his horse with a brutal swing of his shield. The Kingslayer wheels for a killing stroke, only to have a giant direwolf crash into him from the side. Grey Wind's weight slams Jaime to the ground, jaws snapping inches from Jaime's face. Jaime grapples with the beast, golden armor now smeared with mud and blood. Jon arrives just in time. He seizes Jaime's fallen sword and, with the help of a Mallister bannerman, yanks the Kingslayer's helm off and presses the point of that very sword to Jaime's throat. "Yield!" Jon commands, breathless. Around them, dozens of Lannister soldiers lie dead or dying, and the rest throw down their weapons as northern bannermen swarm the road. Jaime Lannister, recognizing defeat, ceases struggling under Grey Wind's hulking form and lets out a bitter laugh. "I yield. The Kingslayer yields to you. Who now?" His cocky smirk falters when he sees who bested him. "Ned Stark's bastard, is it?" he spits out, half amused, half irritated. Jon meets Jaime's gaze coolly. "You're our prisoner," is all Jon replies, reining in any personal pride. Nearby, Robb rises to his feet, dusted with dirt but unharmed, and signals Grey Wind off. The direwolf reluctantly steps back from Jaime, though he continues to growl low in his throat. By dawn's light, the Starks achieve a stunning victory. The siege of Riverrun is lifted, and the young wolf's host triumphantly enters the castle gates with Jaime Lannister in chains. There is rejoicing among the Tully bannermen. Catelyn Stark rushes to embrace her son Robb, tears of relief in her eyes at this respite of hope after so much fear for her family. She even gives Jon a tight, awkward smile of gratitude, though she cannot bring herself to embrace him. Jon bows his head respectfully to Lady Stark, careful to maintain a courteous distance. He knows Catelyn has never been comfortable around him, but in this moment of victory, he hopes perhaps he has earned a measure of her acknowledgement. If nothing else, Jon's role in capturing the Kingslayer cannot be denied. Inside the Great Hall of Riverrun, the Stark Tully force regroups. Edmure Tully is freed from his own failed defense, and he thanks his nephew Robb profusely for the rescue. Sir Brynden Blackfish claps Jon on the back and jokes, "Not bad for your first battle, Snow. You and that pale wolf of yours fight like the devil." Jon manages a modest grin. "We had a good plan, sir." And Grey Wind had a lot to do with Jaime's fall. Across the hall, bound and under guard, Jaime Lannister lounges with irreverent ease for a captive. He taunts whoever passes close, asking if they've brought him dinner or a fresh horse so he can go home. Despite his predicament, Jaime's confidence is only slightly dented. Catelyn's joy at the victory is dampened by worry for her daughters in King's Landing and for her husband's fate. They send ravens to King's Landing with a proposal. Jaime Lannister will be kept alive and treated well, but if any harm comes to Ned Stark, Sansa, or Arya, the Kingslayer will lose his head. It's a tenuous bargaining chip, but all they have. Over the next few days, the victorious mood at Riverrun sours when the Lannisters respond with cruelty. A raven from King's Landing brings devastating news. In the capital, King Joffrey has executed Eddard Stark on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor. The North's worst fears are realized in one savage act of royal arrogance. Lord Eddard is dead, betrayed after seeming to confess to treason. The North and Riverlands are shocked and furious. The hope of exchanging Jaime for Ned is shattered. Sansa Stark remains a hostage to the Iron Throne, and Arya's whereabouts are still unknown, though we, the audience, know she escaped the city and is somewhere on the King's Road, presumed a commoner boy in the eyes of the Lannisters. When the Raven's message is read aloud in Riverrun's hall, Catelyn's anguished cry echoes off the stone walls. She collapses to her knees, inconsolable in grief for her beloved Ned. Robb's young face goes pale, stricken by the loss of his father and the knowledge that he was unable to save him. The gathered lords erupt in rage. The Great Jon roars for vengeance, demanding they march on King's Landing at once and kill every Lannister they find. Others shout their assent. Amidst this storm of anger and sorrow, Jon Snow feels tears in his eyes for the father who raised him. Ned was the only father Jon ever knew, the man who taught him honor. Jon's grief is as real as any true-born son's, but he forces himself to remain steady, knowing Robb needs him now more than ever. Jaime Lannister, hearing of Ned Stark's death, actually looks genuinely upset for a moment. He hadn't expected the fools in King's Landing to actually kill Eddard, but Jaime's regret, or whatever semblance of it he has, is drowned out by the furious clamor of Northerners around him. Outside Riverrun, by the light of the camp's bonfires, the Northmen and Riverlords hold a council to decide the future. With the Iron Throne spilling Stark blood and no Stark in King's Landing to bend the knee, many conclude there is no point in continuing to support a kingdom that murdered their liege. Great Jon Umber, hand-bandaged from his direwolf bite but unbowed, is the first to proclaim what so many feel: why march on King's Landing for a dead king's favor? There sits the only king I mean to bow to. He points his sword at Robb Stark. The king in the north. He drops to one knee, and one by one, the other lords follow, kneeling before a stunned Robb. "The king in the north," they shout, voices echoing into the night. The River Lords, too, faced with the mad boy King Joffrey, who murdered their beloved Ned Stark and ravaged their lands, decide to join the cause of northern independence. They turn to Catelyn's brother Edmure and say the Riverlands will also accept Robb Stark as their king if he will have them, forming a new alliance against the Iron Throne. Robb Stark, grief-stricken and humbled, accepts the dire responsibility laid upon him. He is now king in the north and Trident, as his bannermen cheer. Jon Snow kneels beside Robb, a small, proud smile on his face despite his tears for Ned. Robb raises him up immediately. "You are my brother, Jon," Robb declares to all. "Your sword will be ever at my side." The northern lords, many of whom once eyed Jon with distrust, accept this openly now. Jon, the bastard who refused to be sidelined, has proved himself in battle and loyalty. If the king in the north considers him a brother, that is enough for them. Even Lady Catelyn, standing apart with sorrow etched into her face, cannot object in this moment. She only closes her eyes, holding back tears, as the gathering shifts from mourning Eddard to rallying around Robb. The direwolves Greywind and Ghost watch on, howling their approval into the night sky as if echoing the cry, "King in the North." The War of the Five Kings now enters a new stage. Joffrey Baratheon sits on the Iron Throne in King's Landing, but his rash cruelty has turned the North and Riverlands into open rebellion seeking independence. Renly Baratheon has crowned himself king in Highgarden, gathering the might of the Reach and Stormlands, though unbeknownst to Robb, Renly will soon face his brother Stannis' challenge in the south. For now, Robb Stark's focus is on defending his newly declared kingdom and rescuing Sansa and Arya from Lannister hands. Through the fall and into winter's approach, King Robb's army secures the Riverlands piece by piece. With Jaime Lannister as their hostage, the Stark-Tully alliance gains some leverage. Tywin Lannister, however, is not cowed by his son's capture. Tywin is regrouping further south, having learned of the fall of Jaime's host. Instead of engaging Roose Bolton at the Green Fork as originally planned, Tywin unexpectedly turns his army and marches to the west, southward, to the relief of King's Landing when he hears that another threat, Stannis Baratheon's fleet, is sailing on the capital. In a twist of fate, Robb's carving of the Lannister forces in the Riverlands indirectly helps save King's Landing from Stannis. With Jaime captured and the northern forces victorious at Riverrun, Tywin abandons the Riverlands front and races to protect his grandson Joffrey's throne. This gives Robb Stark a brief opportunity to breathe. Tywin's departure leaves a power vacuum in the heart of the Riverlands. Harrenhal, the massive ruined castle that served as Tywin's headquarters, falls into the hands of Roose Bolton, who marches in unopposed after Tywin's legions march out. The small Lannister garrison left at Harrenhal is quickly overwhelmed or turns cloak to serve the winning side. Roose Bolton sends word to Robb of his success and extends an invitation for King Robb to move there for winter quarters. But Robb distrusts the cursed fortress and chooses to remain with his host near Riverrun for the time being, continuing to raid any pockets of Lannister loyalists and protect the Riverlands villages from foraging soldiers. Jon supports Robb's instincts, agreeing that Harrenhal's reputation as a dark, haunted place and Roose Bolton's curious eagerness to host the king are both unsettling. As the Stark forces consolidate their hold on the Trident region, Catelyn Stark embarks on a diplomatic mission. She rides south under a flag of truce to treat with Renly Baratheon, hoping to secure an alliance. Robb has sent his mother to see if the Baratheon claimant will join forces or at least acknowledge northern independence in exchange for aid against the Lannisters. Jon had wanted to accompany Lady Catelyn to ensure her safety, but Catelyn firmly refused the offer. "I will not have Ned's son." She caught herself, then corrected, "Ned's blood, out of Robb's protection. I know you mean well, Jon, but you are needed here." It's a rare moment where she almost called him Ned's son. Perhaps, in her grief, some of her resentment has softened. Jon acceded and remained with Robb, while Catelyn went to the Stormlands. At Storm's End, Catelyn's negotiations with Renly prove ultimately fruitless as in canon. Any possible alliance is rendered moot when Renly Baratheon is mysteriously assassinated in the night by a shadow with a face like Stannis Baratheon. Word of Renly's shocking death and the bizarre rumors of sorcery reach Robb's camp weeks later. The Tyrells, who supported Renly, vanish from the board for now, soon to reappear aligning with Lannister interests. and Stannis Baratheon claims Renly's banners for himself. Lady Catelyn returns from that ill-fated parley, accompanied by Brienne of Tarth, Renly's former Kingsguard who swore loyalty to Catelyn after witnessing the shadowy murder of her king. Catelyn describes to Robb and Jon the horror she saw, a shadow killing Renly. And though some in the camp are skeptical of such sorcery, Jon listens with widening eyes. He has grown up on old Nan stories of grumpkins and snarks, and here is a tale of dark magic in the south. It sends a shiver through him. Robb, too, cannot ignore this news. If true, Stannis has some fell magic at his command, he says. We must be cautious, but we cannot let these southern battles distract us from our purpose. The Lannisters still hold my sisters. Catelyn shares another piece of information. Before his death, Renly Baratheon had been open to at least discussing terms with the North. Now, with Renly gone and Stannis and Joffrey poised to clash, the political landscape shifts. Unbeknownst to the Starks, Tywin Lannister has forged a new alliance in the capital. The Tyrells have agreed to support King Joffrey in exchange for a marriage between Joffrey and Margaery Tyrell. That alliance's first fruit is the crushing of Stannis Baratheon's fleet and army at the Battle of the Blackwater Bay. Ravens soon carry word of the great battle. King's Landing was saved by wildfire, the timely arrival of Tywin's reinforcements, and the Tyrell cavalry smashing Stannis' forces. Stannis Baratheon survives but is forced to retreat to Dragonstone in defeat. His bid for the throne halted for now. King Joffrey remains ensconced on the Iron Throne, backed by the combined power of Lannister and Tyrell. King Robb and his advisors realize this means the entire might of the Iron Throne, now flushed with fresh Tyrell armies, can soon be brought to bear against the North and Riverlands. They'll come for us next, now that Stannis is broken. Edmure Tully frets. We must prepare. Robb sets his jaw. The best jaw rates. Let them come, they will find the North remembers. Yet privately, Robb and Jon discuss the grim odds. The North and Riverlands armies are battle-hardened but far fewer than the combined hosts of the Lannisters and Tyrells, who could number well over 50 or 60,000. If Tywin Lannister marches north with all his power, even our valor may not be enough, Jon admits quietly. Robb nods, troubled. We'll need new strategies, and perhaps new allies. But before any such reckoning with the Iron Throne forces can occur, dire news arrives from the north. A raven from Winterfell, bearing Theon Greyjoy's personal seal. With disbelief and mounting fury, Robb and Jon read Theon's letter. Theon Greyjoy, Robb's childhood friend and ward, whom Robb had sent to the Iron Islands to seek an alliance, has betrayed them. Balon Greyjoy has crowned himself king of the Iron Islands and launched an invasion of the North while Robb's armies are away. Even worse, Theon himself has taken Winterfell by treachery. The letter is full of Theon's bravado, declaring that Winterfell is his and demanding the Northmen yield to the rule of the Ironborn. There is no mention of Bran or Rickon's fate in the message, but later reports from fleeing smallfolk bring horrifying rumors. Word spreads that Theon Greyjoy executed the two youngest Stark boys and displayed their charred bodies above the gates of Winterfell as proof of his power. When this news is confirmed, Catelyn's fragile composure shatters. The loss of her husband was crippling, but now to think Bran and little Rickon, her last two sons by blood, are dead at the hands of a traitor she once tolerated under her roof? Catelyn's grief turns to icy fury toward Theon, and even, perhaps unfairly, toward Robb, for trusting Theon on that mission. I told Eddard he should not have kept that boy, she says in a cracked voice. We were fools to think Balon Greyjoy's son could ever be our friend. Robb stands in stunned silence, guilt and rage warring on his face. Jon, meanwhile, is trembling with emotion. Though Bran and Rickon were only his half-brothers, Jon loved them deeply. Memories flood him of little Rickon trailing him around the yard, of Bran begging Jon not to leave for the wall. Ghost whines at Jon's side, sensing his distress. Jon's grief quickly burns to anger at Theon's betrayal. He recalls uneasy feelings he had before Theon left, little comments Theon made about his father's weakness and wanting a crown. Jon punches a wooden table in frustration, splintering the map of the North spread across it. I should have stopped him. I should have seen it in him, Jon growls. Robb shakes his head, eyes wet. No. I sent him, Jon. I trusted Theon. This is on me. In the wake of this catastrophe, Robb's leadership faces its first real internal challenge. Lord Rickard Karstark, whose 2 sons died fighting Jaime Lannister's troops earlier in the war, speaks up bitterly. "We bleed for you in the south, while the Greyjoys steal our very homes. Is the young wolf a king or a boy? He failed to protect his brothers, failed to protect the north." His words are like poison in the air. Several northern lords grumble agreement, fear and grief driving them to lash out. Tensions threaten to crack the Stark alliance from within. Jon springs to Robb's defense. "How dare you, my lord?" Jon spits at Karstark, forgetting for a moment his bastard station. "King Robb has led us to victory after victory. Theon's treachery is not his doing. The Ironborn will pay for every atrocity 100-fold. Some of the assembled lords nod at Jon's passionate outburst. Great Jon Umber bares his teeth, glowering at Karstark. The bastard speaks truly, will make the Krakens wish they'd never left their islands. Karstark, still simmering, holds his tongue for now, chastened by angry glares from other lords, and by Ghost's red-eyed stare. The assembly shifts from blame to planning vengeance. Robb thanks Jon quietly later for that, knowing Jon's quick defense helped quell a dangerous moment of discord. Robb's next moves are critical. He needs to respond to the Ironborn invasion without abandoning his position in the south against the Lannisters. In canon, this dilemma paralyzed Robb and ultimately forced him into the ill-fated agreement with Walder Frey again. Here, with no violation of the Frey Pact yet, Robb still has Frey troops and support, and Jon's presence provides another option. Robb calls a war council to address the Greyjoy crisis. "I cannot march the entire army back north. That's exactly what Tywin Lannister would want, to draw us out and reclaim the Riverlands," Robb explains. "But neither can I do nothing while my home burns." It's Lord Roose Bolton who steps forward smoothly with a proposal. He will take a force of lesser troops, some of the Freerider cavalry, and levies from the minor houses, and his bastard son Ramsay Snow, who is near Winterfell, to deal with the Ironborn occupation. "My bastard has already been raising a few hundred men from our lands," Bolton says, a glint in his pale eyes. "He is loyal to our cause and will retake Winterfell in your name, your grace." Many present recall that Ramsay Snow is a cruel wretch with a sinister reputation, but resources are stretched thin. Catelyn distrusts Bolton, and the mention of his bastard sends a chill through her, but she is too distraught to object if it means saving what might remain of her youngest sons. And with most major lords already in Robb's host, sending any of them away would weaken their fight against the Iron Throne. Robb finally agrees to Roose's plan. "Very well, but I want Theon Greyjoy taken alive if possible," he orders. "I want to look him in the eye and ask him why before we deliver the king's justice." Jon's jaw clenches at the thought of confronting Theon. "If Ramsay Snow finds him first, he'll wish he were dead already," mutters Sir Blackfish darkly, aside to Jon. Jon doesn't know Ramsay Snow personally, but he's heard vile rumors of flayed corpses and sadistic hunts. Still, if the bastard of Bolton can end Theon's occupation, Jon will accept the help. "Just save something for us," Jon replies grimly. With that settled, Robb decides to press his advantages in the south to force a resolution before Tywin can unleash the full might of his alliances. At this point in the war, Robb's army, though victorious in every engagement so far, is isolated deep in enemy territory, and cracks are beginning to show. In the original timeline, around here is where Robb made his critical mistake of marrying Jane Westerling, losing the Frey alliance. In our scenario, Jon Snow's steady counsel and presence aims to avert that mistake. Still, the seeds of temptation exist. After the crushing news of Bran and Rickon's supposed deaths, Robb and his closest companions are deeply shaken. In the aftermath, Robb suffers not only grief but also guilt and loneliness. During the continued campaign in the Westerlands, for Robb had moved part of his force westward to keep pressure on Lannister home territory after freeing Riverrun, Robb takes a minor wound while capturing the small castle of the Crag, seat of House Westerling. There, the young maiden Jane Westerling tends to Robb's injury. She is gentle and kind, offering comfort as he laments his brother's fate. In canon, this leads to Robb breaking his vow and marrying her. But now Jon is present, keeping a watchful eye on his grieving brother. One rainy evening in the Crag's Keep, Jane brings Robb poppy milk for his pain and a steadying hand for his sorrow. Robb, distraught about his brothers and worried for his sisters, finds solace in her kindness. They talk late into the night. Robb, with his guard down, nearly gives in to a moment of vulnerability and attraction. But outside Robb's chamber, Ghost suddenly begins to howl, a long, haunting sound that echoes through the stone halls. It's enough to startle Jane and snap Robb from the brink of a foolish lapse. He remembers himself, apologizes to Jane for any impropriety, and withdraws to his solitude. The next day, Jon approaches him quietly. Ghost had sensed Robb's anguish and perhaps something more. Jon gently reminds Robb of his duty. "You are a king, Robb. You cannot afford to act for only your heart now. Think of Sansa and Arya. They depend on you. Think of Father, of Bran and Rickon wanting you to remain just." Robb nods, eyes red but resolute. "I know. You're right. Gods, what was I thinking?" he murmurs. Jon clasps his brother's shoulder. "We will have justice for our brothers, for all our family. But we must be smart. We have to hold everything together." And so, Robb Stark does not break his vow to the Freys. He thanks Jane Westerling for her care but departs the crag with only a courteous bow and some provisions, leaving the lady unwed and the Frey pact intact. This deviation is crucial. By keeping Robb from a dishonorable, if understandable, mistake, Jon has unknowingly prevented the spark that would have ignited Walder Frey's wrath. House Westerling receives generous compensation for their hospitality and a promise that Jane will be found a noble husband once the war is done. But Robb Stark resumes command of his army with his betrothal promise to a Frey girl still in place. As winter's chill begins creeping into the air, King Robb recalls his host from the Westerlands. Enough damage has been done there to unnerve Tywin's bannermen and make the Lannisters bleed. Now Robb intends to fortify the Riverlands for the onslaught he expects from King's Landing. The army returns to Riverrun, where they join up with the soldiers Roose Bolton had left there. Catelyn is relieved to see her son back safe. She had feared the Westerlands' campaign left him too exposed. She continues to press for a way to free Sansa, the one daughter known to be alive in the Lannisters' clutches. Meanwhile, life for Sansa Stark in King's Landing has taken a cruel twist. With her father dead and war raging, Tywin Lannister decides to secure the North another way, by marrying Sansa to his son Tyrion Lannister. Ravens carry word of this political marriage to Riverrun. Robb is livid at the Gall. "They think to steal our birthright by chaining Sansa to the imp," he fumes. Catelyn, horrified that her daughter is essentially being used as a pawn, shares in the anger but counsels patience. Perhaps this means Sansa's life is in no immediate danger, at least. Jon seethes quietly at the news. He remembers Tyrion from their brief time traveling to the Wall months ago. Tyrion treated Jon with more respect than most, but the thought of Sansa being forced to wed any Lannister fills him with protective rage. "We will get her back," he vows to Catelyn, who gives him a strained, sad smile. "Get her back." "Yes," Catelyn whispers, as though saying a prayer. During this time, the other great betrayal in Robb's camp unfolds quietly at first. Lord Rickard Karstark's bitterness over his son's deaths at Lannister hands has been simmering since Jaime's capture. In the original timeline, when Catelyn freed Jaime to exchange for her daughters, Karstark lost his chance for vengeance and murdered 2 Lannister prisoners, leading to his execution by Robb. Here, because Jon prevented Cat from taking such a rash step, Jaime Lannister remains Robb's captive under heavy guard. Lady Catelyn considered freeing Jaime after learning of Bran and Rickon's death, in a desperate attempt to trade him for Sansa, just as she did in canon, but Jon and others keep close watch precisely to avoid any secret release. One night, Catelyn does approach Jaime's cell, with Brienne in tow, intending to perhaps bargain with him for her daughters. She finds Jaime smirking even in fetters, and she falters. "If I let you go, could you save Sansa? Bring her back to me," she asks quietly. Jaime yawns. "I could try, my lady, but I make no guarantees without certain indulgences." It's unclear if he's mocking or half serious, but Brienne glowers at him regardless. Before Catelyn can do something irrevocable, Jon appears in the dungeon corridor. He had suspected what she might attempt. In a calm but firm voice, Jon talks her down. "Lady Catelyn, think of what Robb would want. If we lose our only leverage, we lose Sansa too." Catelyn's eyes flash with desperation, but she knows he speaks true. Through tears, she steps back from Jaime's cell. "We will find another way," Jon assures her gently. Brienne puts a hand on Catelyn's shoulder, guiding her away from the Kingslayer's cage. Jaime Lannister lives to see another day as a prisoner, and Karstark's vengeance is still technically on the table. However, Rickard Karstark grows impatient. With every Raven's report of his lost son's killer, Jaime, still alive and being merely held, Karstark's grief turns to treasonous intent. He cannot touch Jaime, who is under constant guard, but 2 young Lannister squires captured in an earlier skirmish remain prisoners at Riverrun as well. One stormy night, Karstark and a handful of his loyal men sneak into the tower where the captives are held and murder the squires in cold blood, calling it justice for my sons. The camp awakens to the ugly scene of innocent blood spilled. King Robb is furious at this heinous breach of order and honor. These boys were not responsible for the crimes in question. Karstark killed them out of blind vengeance. Robb has Karstark and the accomplices arrested at once. Jon stands witness as Robb holds a court the next day. They were boys, unarmed, and are prisoners. There is no excuse, Robb declares angrily. Rickard Karstark, unrepentant, snarls, "The Lannisters killed my boys. Your mother would have released the Kingslayer and denied me my justice. I did what had to be done." Robb's face darkens. "You betrayed me. You have slain innocents I gave my word to protect. For that, Karstark, you will pay with your life." Catelyn, still raw from loss, privately advises mercy or at least caution. Executing a powerful lord like Karstark could cost Robb dearly, since the Karstark men might desert or even turn against them. Jon too counsels Robb in private. "Perhaps there's another way, Robb. Lord Karstark is consumed by grief. Maybe confine him instead until the war's over." Robb wrestles with the decision, but in the end, his father's sense of justice and Robb's own anger at the betrayal wins out. "He killed 2 children under our protection," Robb says heavily. "If I excuse that, what does that make us? No, the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword." And so, following the Stark way, Robb executes Rickard Karstark himself in Riverrun's courtyard, ice, Ned's great sword clutched in both hands. The great blade falls and Karstark's head rolls. Jon watches grimly. It is the first time he's seen Robb perform an execution. As Karstark's blood darkens the snow, Jon hopes this will not prove a costly mistake. Indeed, Karstark's execution nearly fractures the Northern Army. Many of Karstark's riders, their lord now dead, abandon the cause that very night, slipping away to head home or even to turn cloak for promise of gold. Robb loses a few thousand men to desertion in one stroke. "We're falling to pieces," Robb laments to Jon and Catelyn afterward, despair creeping into his voice. "Half our forces gone with Karstark's kin, and we've still no answer for the Lannisters' might." Jon refuses to let his brother fall into despair. Not half. Only the impatient and disloyal are gone. "We who remain will fight twice as hard," Jon says, trying to bolster Robb's spirits. "We still have the Freys, the Riverlords, and all of the North's strength that stayed true," Catelyn adds softly. "And you have loyal bannermen yet. Maege Mormont, the Great Jon, the Lannisters, they won't falter." Robb straightens, resolved again. "You're both right. We will make do. The war isn't lost yet." Walder Frey is upset to hear of the loss of Karstark's men, fewer allies for him to hide behind, but he is mollified when Robb writes to reassure him that the marriage pact will soon be fulfilled. Robb indicates that once the immediate threats are dealt with, he will gladly wed the Frey girl of Lord Walder's, choosing at the twins as originally promised. Walder Frey responds with unusually warm courtesy. For him, saying he looks forward to celebrating the union when the time comes. No mention is made by either side that Robb's campaign is faltering, though Walder is surely aware of the strategic position. It's a polite fiction they both maintain for now, as the Freys remain officially allies. In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister, now Hand of the King, is not idle. He orchestrates a brutal plan to end the Stark rebellion. He's already sowing influence via letters and gold into the Stark camp, probing for weaknesses. In the original timeline, Tywin exploited Robb's broken marriage vow to lure Walder Frey and Roose Bolton into a murderous plot. In this timeline, with Robb keeping his word, Tywin's task is harder, but not impossible. Tywin still senses opportunists like Roose Bolton in the northern ranks. Through intermediaries and coded letters, Tywin reaches out to Lord Bolton at Harrenhal, suggesting rich rewards, Warden of the North perhaps, if Bolton were to help end the war swiftly. Bolton, ever a calculating man, keeps these communications very secret. On the surface, he remains dutiful, but he begins deploying his forces in a way that leaves Robb subtly more exposed, such as sending fewer reinforcements than promised or delaying movements. Jon notices that Roos's letters and messengers often arrive late, or that Bolton seems disinterested in rejoining Robb's main host since taking Harrenhal. Jon mentions to Robb more than once, "Roose Bolton is too quiet at Harrenhal. I don't trust it." But with Karstark's defection and the Greyjoys rampaging in the north, Robb cannot afford to alienate another major lord without proof. He reluctantly maintains polite correspondence with Bolton, urging him to bring his forces to Riverrun to help press the fight. Winter is coming, quite literally, and both sides know campaigning will be more difficult as snows deepen. King Robb decides on a bold plan to force a decision before the year's end. He will attempt to strike a peace or at least secure his gains via diplomacy, backed by the threat of Jaime Lannister's life, before the full might of the Lannister-Tyrell alliance can overwhelm them. To that end, Robb and his council send an envoy to King's Landing, the prisoner, Sir Jaime himself. This is a twist. Rather than Catelyn freeing Jaime in secret as in canon, here Robb uses Jaime openly as a bargaining chip. They send word to Tywin that Jaime Lannister, heir to Casterly Rock, will be released on parole to King's Landing if and only if Sansa Stark is returned unharmed to her family and an armistice granted recognizing the North's autonomy. Tywin's response is cold and cunning. He delays, feigning interest in the trade, while secretly instructing his pet Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, to intensify raids in the Riverlands to keep the Starks off balance. Jaime, in transit under heavy Stark guard, with Brienne and others escorting him, nearly gets recaptured or killed by Lannister scouts more than once. It seems Tywin's not above sacrificing his son if it means keeping Jaime out of Stark hands and causing Robb to lose leverage. But Brienne of Tarth proves her mettle, keeping Jaime safe from any accidents and ensuring this peace mission remains viable. Jaime arrives in King's Landing alive, though minus his sword hand, one of Roose Bolton's sellswords, the brutal Vargo Hoat, took the liberty of maiming Jaime during the prisoner transfer, a needless cruelty that Roose claims was a miscommunication. This echoes canon where Jaime lost his hand under Bolton's watch, further sowing chaos. The loss of his sword hand leaves Jaime humiliated and enraged in King's Landing, and perhaps strangely sympathetic to the Stark's plight in a way he wasn't before. When presented to the court, Jaime actually advises his father to accept a temporary peace. "The Starks could have killed me a dozen times over. They treated me fairly. Return the Stark girl to them, father. End this so I can go back to killing the Tullys and Stark men on the battlefield instead of rotting in a cell." Tywin fumes at his son's insolence and perceived weakness now that he's maimed, and refuses outright to grant Northern independence. He will not have the legacy of Tywin Lannister soiled by a breakup of the realm. "Absolutely not. I will not permit the North to secede and make me appear weak," he declares. However, he does want Jaime safe, and he knows holding Sansa Stark has value. So Tywin counters with a proposal. He will release Sansa to remain at the capital as Tyrion's wife, which is already the case after the forced marriage, but in comfortable care, not harmed. And he will grant a royal pardon to the Northern Lords for their rebellion if they lay down their arms and swear fealty again. In short, he demands unconditional surrender disguised as mercy. When this offer is delivered to Robb at Riverrun, by Raven and by the impish Tyrion Lannister himself, who volunteers to travel to Riverrun as an envoy, it's immediately rejected. Yes, Tyrion Lannister rides north as an emissary, accompanied by a cadre of Lannister guards and even the unwilling Sansa, whom Tyrion insisted on bringing to show she's alive and well. Tyrion's journey is fraught with danger. More than once, Stark loyalists nearly take matters into their own hands. But Tyrion's silver tongue and the protection of Stark honor under guest right ensure he reaches Riverrun unscathed. The sight of Sansa, pale but composed, arriving with Tyrion nearly moves Catelyn to break protocols and run to embrace her daughter. But Sansa is technically under Lannister custody and also now Tyrion's wife in the eyes of the crown. So an awkward meeting takes place in Riverrun's Great Hall. Tyrion, ever the diplomat, greets King Robb courteously, even bowing despite his mismatched eyes twinkling with irony. "Your Grace, I brought your sister as a gesture of good faith. and to remind you what's at stake." Sansa, holding her head high, curtsies to Robb, though tears glisten in her eyes when she sees her brother and mother again after so long. It takes all of Catelyn's resolve not to run to her and cause a scene. Negotiations ensue. Tyrion relays Tywin's terms. All northern lords to swear fealty, the north to be ruled by whomever Joffrey, or rather Tywin, appoints as warden, certainly not a Stark, and Robb to come to King's Landing and bend the knee in exchange for a pardon. In return, Sansa might be allowed to eventually go home. Likely not. Tywin would never free such a valuable chess piece fully. It's a sham offer, and everyone knows it. Robb's face hardens as he listens. "You ask me to yield everything my family has fought and died for, and call it mercy?" he says in disgust. Tyrion, sipping on a cup of arbor wine amidst the tense atmosphere, spreads his hands apologetically. "I will not insult you by pretending it's a good deal, King Robb. It's the only deal you'll get from my father." He casts a sympathetic glance toward Sansa. "My lady wife here can attest. Lord Tywin believes in crushing his enemies, not coddling them." The imp's blunt honesty surprises the Stark court. After some private discussion with his council, Jon, Catelyn, Edmure, Blackfish, etc., Robb ultimately refuses Tywin's terms outright. "Tell Lord Tywin, the North remembers, we will never again be subject to the Iron Throne so long as lions rule it. If he wants my crown, let him try to take it." Robb declares this in a voice loud enough for all to hear. Jon stands beside him, Ghost at his feet, projecting confidence. Tyrion sighs as though he expected no less. "Very well, I shall deliver the message, though I fear my father will not take it lightly." A potential flashpoint arises. What to do about Sansa and Tyrion now? Robb and Catelyn ache to keep Sansa safe with them, but honor binds them. Tyrion came under peace banner, and by guest right Sansa too is protected. Tyrion warns, gently, "If you keep my lady wife, my father will claim you've seized an envoy and broken sacred guest rights. He will use it to rally the rest of the realm against you. And my father, well, he has ways of exacting revenge that don't require swords." He doesn't elaborate, perhaps thinking of his own safety or other Stark kin like Arya who might still be out there. It's a tense moment. Catelyn's nails dig into her palms as she shakes with the urge to hold Sansa and not let go. But Sansa, no longer the naive girl who left Winterfell, surprisingly steps toward her family and speaks. "Mother, Robb, I will go back. As a hostage, as Tyrion's wife, whatever they call it. I will endure. I want no more Northmen dying for me. Please." Her bravery in that moment nearly brings Robb to tears. He exchanges a look with Jon. Jon feels a swell of pride and sorrow for his half-sister. He recalls the little girl who dreamed of being a princess, now willingly returning to a gilded cage. Robb nods heavy-heartedly. "You have my word, Sansa. I will come for you. We will come for you," he promises. He allows Sansa to embrace their mother, and even Jon, for Tyrion does not object to a quick and heartfelt reunion, knowing it might be the last they have for a while. Sansa whispers to Jon during their brief hug, "Thank you for being here to help Robb. I prayed you would keep him safe, and you have." Jon swallows back a lump in his throat. "I won't rest until you're safe and home, Sansa. Remember that." And so Tyrion Lannister departs Riverrun with Sansa, the mission a failure in terms of peace. But Tyrion has gleaned much. He saw the resolve of Robb's supporters, the influence Jon Snow has on Robb, and he knows now that the Stark leadership are not fools to be tricked easily. Tyrion also perhaps leaves with a bit of admiration for these Northerners and pity for his lady wife. As he rides away, he tells Sansa quietly, "Your brothers are impressive men, stubborn but impressive. We'll have to hope this war ends before it kills all of them." Sansa simply stares back at the silhouette of Riverrun receding and whispers, "The old gods will protect them. And you, Tyrion, if you do right by my family." Tyrion simply nods, understanding the gravity of her trust. With negotiations broken down, King Robb prepares for the full wrath of the Iron Throne's armies. He knows Tywin will come north now with not only Lannister forces but the Tyrell host as well, not to mention whatever lords of the Reach, Crownlands, and possibly Dorne, though Dorne thus far remains aloof, he can muster. The odds are long. Northern scouts report Lannister banners gathering at the crossroads and thousands of Tyrell men flowing up the Rose Road toward the Riverlands. The Riverlands themselves are war-weary and scorched by prior battles. Supplies run thin as winter's approach shortens the foraging season. Robb summons his vassals for a council of war to devise a defensive strategy. Jon is there, along with Edmure, Blackfish, Roose Bolton, who finally has rejoined with a portion of his force from Harrenhal, leaving a garrison behind, the Great Jon Mage Mormont, and others. They consider retreating north of the Twins, where the choke point of Moat Cailin could allow a handful of Northerners to hold off an entire southern host. But abandoning the Riverlands, who bled for them, doesn't sit well with Robb or the Tullys. Edmure argues they must defend their homeland here. Blackfish suggests guerrilla tactics, harass Tywin's supply lines, burn the villages before the Lannisters can, leave them advancing in a wasteland. Make the Southern Lions starve and freeze as winter sets in, he says. This is somewhat implemented. The Stark forces send outriders to wage a brutal war of attrition where possible. However, to truly stop the Iron Throne's juggernaut, one decisive stroke might be needed, removing Tywin Lannister himself or breaking the alliance. Jon wonders aloud if the Tyrells truly want to continue this costly fight now Renly is dead. Without Renly, they have no personal grudge against us. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Catelyn counters they've tied themselves to Joffrey now with Margaery's engagement. They won't abandon that easily, unless Joffrey were not an option. She doesn't elaborate, but everyone knows she refers to Joffrey's illegitimacy or his possible death. It's a dark thought, to hope an assassin's blade or poison might remove the boy king and destabilize the Lannisters from within. They have no immediate means to make that happen, but fate may intervene on that front soon enough. As the massive Lannister Tyrell host advances into the Riverlands, Robb Stark arrays his remaining army for confrontation. Realizing he cannot win a head-on battle against superior numbers, Robb chooses the ground carefully. He falls back to the northernmost Riverlands, near the Twins, where the land narrows between the forks of the Trident and the boggy edges of the Neck. The Freys, still ostensibly allies, are asked to hold the Twins and allow Stark Tully forces to maneuver around it. If Tywin wants to cross into the northern Riverlands, he must either force the Twins, unlikely given Frey neutrality toward him, and Frey is still bound by guest right from Robb's earlier crossing, or find a ford. Robb sets his battle lines near a place called Fairmarket, close to the Red Fork where wooded hills offer some defensive advantage. In the calm before the storm, Jon Snow is given a command of his own. Robb places Jon in charge of a contingent of archers and skirmishers, including many of the free folk that Mage Mormont's forces picked up. Yes, free folk. Because here we introduce a twist that's been brewing beyond the wall. While all these kings and lords fight, the wildlings are on the move. In the far north, the great ranging of the Night's Watch that Jon Snow never joined still happened under Lord Commander Jorah Mormont. It ended disastrously at the Fist of the First Men, where the White Walkers ambushed the Night's Watch. Samwell Tarly, one of Jon's would-be friends, barely survived and slew another with dragonglass, escaping to tell the tale. Mormont's surviving men mutinied at Craster's Keep, resulting in Jorah Mormont's death, events that in canon Jon missed by being with the Wildlings. Now, with the Watch in disarray, Mance Rayder's Wildling army has come south. In our timeline, Jon infiltrated them and later helped thwart their assault on the Wall. But here, with Jon absent, the defense of the Wall was far less effective. By the time Stannis Baratheon, reeling from Blackwater and influenced by Melisandre's visions, sailed north to aid the Wall, he found Castle Black overrun. In fact, Stannis arrived to find the gigantic siege of the Wall in progress, with giants and mammoths breaking through the gates and the remnants of the Night's Watch making a final stand. Stannis' unexpected charge scattered the Wildling army enough to halt the immediate takeover, but Mance Rayder's host of tens of thousands of free folk simply pulled back a safe distance. Stannis lacked the numbers to pursue into the true north, so a tense stalemate holds at the Wall. Ravens from Maester Aemon at Castle Black, just before he died of age perhaps, spread word of this situation. The Wall is breached in places and only partially manned, and far worse, the Walking Dead have been sighted in the far north. The Southern Lords, embroiled in their own war, largely ignore these pleas, but in Winterfell, or what's left of it, and surrounding northern lands, people have seen signs. Earlier that fall, a freak snowstorm and a rash of disturbing tales from surviving Black brothers who deserted and fled south talk of an army of the dead gathering beyond the wall. These tales sound absurd to most, but not to all. In White Harbor, Wyman Manderley fortifies his city and prays to the Seven for gone. At the Dread Fort, Roose Bolton receives reports that his bastard Ramsay succeeded in retaking Winterfell from the Ironborn, though the castle was torched in the process. Ramsay sends his father a grisly gift, Theon Greyjoy flayed and broken, kept barely alive in a dungeon. The news of Winterfell's recapture, albeit ruined, and Theon's fate reaches Robb's host as they prepare for the Lannister assault. Jon is relieved Winterfell is back in Stark hands nominally, but disturbed by the horrific rumors of Bolton's bastard's cruelty. Jon pleads with Robb, "After we face Tywin, we must deal with Bolton's bastard and the Ironborn remnants." The North is still bleeding. Robb agrees. Once this battle is done, he plans to ride north to restore order, but first they must secure their independence by smashing or at least repelling the Southern Army. Now, finally, the battle that will determine the fate of the Stark Rebellion is at hand. On one side, King Robb's army of Northerners and Riverlords, perhaps 15,000 strong, plus a few thousand Frey bannermen under the nominal command of Walder's sons, their loyalty shaky but publicly there. On the other, Lord Tywin Lannister leading a host of 25,000 Lannister men, merged with Mace Tyrell's 40,000 from the Reach, plus additional Crownlanders, over 60,000 in total, the largest army Westeros has seen in decades. They call it the Battle of the Twins, since it unfolds near the crossing, though not at the castle itself. Tywin's goal is to crush Robb's army, capture or kill the Stark leadership, and reopen the way into the north to restore royal authority. Robb's goal is more modest: survive. If he can bloody the lions and make the cost of subduing the north too high, perhaps Tywin will relent or at least withdraw to handle other pressing issues, like keeping King's Landing secure as unrest grows there under Joffrey's misrule. The battle begins at dawn under gray, snow-laden skies. Tywin splits his massive force into 3 battalions to try and envelop the smaller Stark host. The right flank is commanded by Ser Kevan Lannister and Loras Tyrell, aiming to cross a ford downstream and hit the Stark left. The center, under Tywin and Mace Tyrell, drives up the main road toward the Twins. The left flank, including much of the Reach cavalry under Randyll Tarly and Mathis Rowan, swings wide to try and cross upstream of the Twins and flank Robb's right. It is a classic hammer and anvil, with Stark forces at risk of being surrounded. But King Robb Stark has set some surprises. The Stark host appears drawn up in a tight formation as though ready to defend against being encircled, inviting Tywin to press all sides. Hidden in the nearby Wolfswood to the north, however, are hundreds of archers and nearly 2,000 light footmen and cavalry under the command of Jon Snow. Jon's detachment includes the elite archers of House Mallister and a ragged band of spearwives and free folk who slipped through the wall during the recent chaos. Jon convinced Robb to accept these wildling fighters who trickled south as refugees after Stannis' standstill. They hate the Lannisters and kneel to no one. They'll fight for blood and survival, Jon argued. Robb, pragmatic and needing every sword, agreed. So now, among Jon's force, a spearwife named Ygritte knocks an arrow next to a black brother named Grenn, the war-making strange allies of old enemies. As the Lannister Tyrell army surges forward, horns blow and steel clashes in a cacophony. Tywin's center slams into Robb's lines. King Robb, in Stark armor and a gray cloak, fights atop his great direwolf bannered stallion. Grey Wind is not far, darting in and out of the fray, ripping men from their saddles. The northern troops, fired by vengeance and home soil, stand firm against the initial charge. Edmure Tully and the Blackfish command the left, holding Kevan Lannister's assault at the ford valiantly. Greatjon Umber anchors the right, meeting Randyll Tarly's flanking maneuver head-on with fierce northern berserkers. It's chaos and carnage. At the height of battle, Tywin sends forward Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, his monstrous champion, to break the Stark center. The Mountain plows through men like a scythe through wheat, his hulking form scattering small folk levies and even armored knights. Robb moves to confront him, but before he can reach Clegane, a ghostly white shape streaks in. Ghost, Jon's direwolf, appears from the flank, having been commanded telepathically by Jon to find the huge knight. Ghost leaps and latches onto the mountain's sword arm, teeth piercing through the gaps in plate. Gregor bellows in pain and fury, shaking the direwolf off and slashing wildly. Ghost is knocked aside, wounded but alive, and Gregor raises his sword to finish the beast, only to be blindsided by gray wind. Robb's direwolf lunges at the mountain from the other side, and the two direwolves together take the giant knight to the ground in a flurry of fur and steel. In that moment, King Robb gallops in and delivers the coup de grace. With ice, his father's greatsword, in hand, Robb cleaves down and Sir Gregor Clegane's head is severed from his massive body. The mountain is fallen by Wolf and Wolf King in tandem. A roar of shock goes up from friend and foe alike. Gregor had been Tywin's war titan, and seeing him slain rattles the Lannister men. Tywin Lannister, however, remains unperturbed. He presses his attack, throwing in reserves. The Stark lines start to buckle under sheer numbers. It is precisely at this critical juncture that Jon Snow springs his trap. He has kept his detachment hidden until both of Tywin's flanks were fully committed across the fords. Now, bursting from the Wolfswood behind the enemy, Jon's force falls upon the rear of Randyll Tarly's flanking battalion. This is the first real taste of battle Jon has commanded on his own. Leading the charge, he lets out a northern war cry, Ghost's distant howl echoing it. The surprise is total. Wildling spearwives hack into the back of Reacher pikemen. Mallister archers send volleys into the densely packed enemy. Northern cavalry, with Jon at the point, drives straight into the back of Tarly's lines. Sir Randyll Tarly, a seasoned but rigid commander, is caught completely off guard by the ferocity of this rear attack. And among those attacking is a figure he never expected to see on a battlefield again, his own disowned son, Samwell Tarly. Yes, Sam, who had been a brother of the Night's Watch, found himself freed from vows when the Watch collapsed after the mutiny and the Wildling assault. Making his way south, Sam eventually reunited with Jon's forces, bringing crucial knowledge of the White Walkers with him. Now here he is, trembling but determined, clad in ill-fitting armor, actually standing against his father's host. Sam doesn't personally fight Randyll, that confrontation may come with words rather than steel later, but his presence is symbolic of the shifts in this war. The proud Tarly forces reel under the shock. Randyll Tarly manages to rally a few men around him and fight his way out, cursing the treacherous cravens ambushing him. But his battalion collapses, many throwing down arms or fleeing. Jon, focusing on the broader battle, doesn't pursue Tarly far. He wheels his force and crashes into the already engaged main battle from the flank now, further heartening the northern men and throwing Tywin's center into confusion. At the same time, on the other flank by the river, Edmure Tully and Brynden Blackfish execute their own stroke of genius. Feigning a retreat across the ford, Edmure lures Ser Kevan Lannister's contingent into a vulnerable position mid-river. Then, hidden upstream, a dam previously prepared by locals, under Blackfish's direction, is broken, sending a sudden rush of water down the fork. A flash flood engulfs the ford, sweeping away dozens of Lannister men-at-arms and sowing chaos in their ranks. The Riverlords then countercharge, with Blackfish slaying Lord Leo Lefford, one of Tywin's generals, in personal combat in the waters. Kevan Lannister's flank is thrown into disarray. All these maneuvers begin to turn the tide. Tywin Lannister, commanding from a hillock, observes with mounting concern as his left flank crumbles and his right flank falters. The center, where he stands with the royal banners, is now at risk of encirclement. An ironic reversal of his plan. Mace Tyrell is by Tywin's side, blustering and urging Tywin to commit the reserve of Highgarden Knights. Tywin, steely-eyed, realizes the battle is lost for today. "Call the retreat," he commands curtly. Trumpets blow a Lannister retreat, and slowly, in good order at first, the great southern host starts pulling back. Robb's army, bloodied but alive, does not aggressively pursue beyond their advantageous ground. Robb reins in hotheads like the Great Jon from chasing too far. The ground is littered with bodies of friend and foe, and the first battle of the twins draws to a close as dusk falls with snow beginning to drift from the sky. It is not a complete rout, but it is a tactical victory for King Robb. Against all odds, they have stopped Tywin Lannister's hitherto unstoppable advance. The cost is heavy. Thousands of Northerners and Riverlanders lie dead or wounded, but the Lannister-Tyrell losses are greater in number, and key figures like Gregor Clegane and Leo Lefford are dead. Morale soars in the Stark camp that night. In the northern tents, they hail Robb as the young wolf unbroken. Songs are sung of the direwolf's ghost and gray winds slaying the mountain. Jon Snow is applauded by lords and free folk alike for his brilliant ambush that shattered the enemy's flank. Around a campfire, small folk whisper that the old gods themselves must favor Ned Stark's sons. Even Lady Catelyn approaches Jon that night. She's reserved, but her words carry genuine respect. "You did well today, Jon," she says quietly, the first time she's ever addressed him without venom in his name. "Your father, Eddard, would have been proud." Jon feels a lump in his throat and simply nods. For Jon, whose life has been plagued by feeling illegitimate, that small acknowledgement from Catelyn is monumental. The war, however, is not over. Tywin Lannister withdraws his host south of the Trident. Winter weather and the blow to his forces lead him to adopt a defensive stance for now. He fortifies Harrenhal and the southern Riverlands with his remaining troops while sending the Tyrells back to the Reach to guard against any opportunistic revolts there, and to keep Mace Tyrell's soldiers fed in their own ample lands rather than strain the crown's supply. King's Landing, he deems, is not in immediate danger from the Starks, so he can hold a line rather than risk another confrontation in harsh conditions. Indeed, Robb doesn't press further south. His goal was never conquest of the capital, only freedom for the north. Both sides hunker down as winter's first true snows fall. A strange quiet descends on the war-torn lands, an armistice born of exhaustion and mutual recognition of pain. Letters are tentatively exchanged via ravens. Neither side calls it a truce officially, but for weeks, then months, the war effort on both fronts slows to a crawl. This allows Robb to turn to urgent matters in the north. The Ironborn still hold Moat Cailin and parts of the northern coast. Winterfell is a smoking ruin under the occupation of Ramsay Snow, Roose Bolton's bastard, who now styles himself the self-proclaimed Prince of Winterfell as a sick joke. Robb cannot abide that insult or brutality any longer. "I've let that monster linger too long," he says when they receive reports from a northern survivor describing Ramsay's depredations, flayed bodies of Ironborn and Stark-loyal people alike decorating the walls of Winterfell. Roose Bolton, still with Robb's host at this point and trying to hide his complicity, feigns shock at his bastard's atrocities. "Allow me to deal with Ramsay, Your Grace. He's a rabid dog, but he is my responsibility," Roose offers smoothly. But Catelyn, finally perceiving the depth of Bolton's cunning, interjects, "Yes, he is your responsibility. One you miserably failed by unleashing him." The disdain in her voice towards Bolton is palpable. Bolton's eyes flicker as he realizes the Starks may suspect him of double-dealing. Jon also speaks up. "We will all deal with Ramsay. Winterfell belongs to the Starks." He and Robb exchange a knowing glance. Before Robb marches north, Walder Frey loudly reminds him of the marriage pact. He invites Robb to come to the Twins to wed his chosen daughter now that winter has halted major offensives. "What better time to honor your vow, Your Grace, than when snow keeps us from battle? We'll have warm fires and a hearty feast waiting," Frey writes. Some of Robb's advisors, like the Blackfish, caution Robb to perhaps fulfill this promise to keep Frey loyal. But Jon is skeptical of the timing and the tone. "Walder Frey is too eager to host us," he notes. "He's hardly a gracious man by nature. Why push for the wedding now?" Catelyn agrees it seems strange. Thanks to Jon's earlier wisdom in preventing any Frey slight, the Freys have had no cause for betrayal, but Walder is ever an ambivalent ally. Ultimately, Robb decides to postpone the marriage until the North is secure. "I have more pressing concerns than bedding a wife right now," he says. He sends polite regrets to Lord Walder, promising to return for the wedding after dealing with the last of the Ironborn and traitors up north. This decision likely saves Robb and many of his men from a bloody trap, for as we know, Walder Frey is not a forgiving man. Offended by Robb's prioritizing of Winterfell over the wedding, and sensing that the war may soon turn decisively one way or another, Walder finally relents to Tywin Lannister's overtures. Quietly, through ravens and messengers in the night, Walder Frey and Roose Bolton cement a pact with the Lannisters behind Robb's back. The Red Wedding that almost happened at Edmure's wedding in the original timeline is thus delayed and reshaped, but the danger still exists. Walder plans to invite Robb at some point and slaughter him when off guard, and Roose, ever seeking the best outcome for himself, agrees to assist when the time comes in exchange for being named Warden of the North under the Iron Throne. For now, though, the scheme remains in the shadows as Robb and his loyalists head north. In early winter, King Robb leads a contingent of his army back through the Neck. Jon rides at his side with a renewed sense of purpose, finally returning to their home soil to liberate it from invaders and traitors. They pass Moat Cailin, still held by Ironborn Reavers under a few of Balon Greyjoy's captains. Having learned of Theon's downfall and Balon's disinterest in a prolonged occupation of the Wolfswood, these Ironborn are now simply trying to plunder what they can and escape. Robb's host, hardened by war, has no trouble routing them. Many Ironborn are cut down or captured. Among the captives is a woman of stern demeanor and iron will, Asha Greyjoy, called Yara on the show, Theon's sister. She had sailed to try to aid her brother, but arrived to find him a prisoner of the Bastard of Bolton. Now she and her men are overwhelmed by the Stark force. Asha expects execution, but Robb Stark instead offers her mercy in exchange for an oath to withdraw all Ironborn from northern shores and never return. Asha, pragmatic and mourning her foolhardy brother, agrees to these terms. She's allowed to take the remnants of her men and sail back to the Iron Islands, carrying Balon Greyjoy a stern warning. The North is off limits. Balon incidentally soon dies, whether by a fall from a bridge during a storm as in canon, or by the machinations of his brother Euron is unclear, but word of the death comes not long after. The Ironborn threat to the north withers as their internal succession crisis begins. Asha keeps her word, focusing on securing her own claim rather than antagonizing the north further. With Moat Cailin reclaimed, Robb's army moves on to Winterfell. The sight that greets them stops them in their tracks. Winterfell's proud granite walls are blackened and shattered in places, wisps of smoke still rising from the ruins. The castle has been burned from within. Theon's desperate last stand and Ramsay's sack saw to that. The land around is littered with graves and corpses left to rot in the snows. Jon is filled with rage and sadness at the ruin of his childhood home. Ghost circles the ruins, sniffing at the death in the air, while Grey Wind lets out a mournful howl that echoes over the empty fields. The Stark banners are gone. In their place, mounted on spikes above the gate, are flayed skins, the Bastard of Bolton's gruesome decorations. Among them, heartbreakingly, is the small direwolf Pelt of Lady, Sansa's direwolf that was killed years ago on Queen Cersei's command and sent back north. The pelt must have been hung here by Ramsay as an intended insult or simply cruelty. Catelyn nearly retches at the sight of the horror. This is Ramsay's work, Robb says quietly, fury dancing in his eyes. They find Ramsay Snow within Winterfell's ruined Great Hall, presiding over a grotesque tableau. He has few men left, most of his force scattered to commit mayhem across the countryside or having fled at the news of Robb's approach. Ramsay, however, has not fled. He greets Robb's arrival with a sly, mad grin, dragging a chained and broken creature before the Stark host. It is Theon Greyjoy, or what remains of him, filthy, mutilated, missing fingers and manhood, and answering only to the name Reek. Ramsay, in a mockery of courtesy, proclaims he's saved the North from the Greyjoys by taking their prince captive for you, and kicks Theon forward. I present the Prince of Fools, huh? What is dead may never die, eh, Greyjoy? Theon cowers, too broken to respond. This disgusting charade is Ramsay's attempt to curry favor or at least sow confusion. Robb's face contorts with disgust and wrath. You betrayed my family, murdered those under our protection, and defiled our home. There will be no parley, he gestures, and his archers knock arrows aimed at Ramsay's remaining brutes. Ramsay's smile falls, turning to a snarl. Father, he calls to Roose, who stands behind Robb. Father, tell them, the North is ours. We had a deal. This shout reveals his treachery to all. Roose Bolton's eyes go wide with alarm and anger at his bastard's outburst, for it exposes Roose's own disloyalty. Some Stark bannermen reach for swords, glaring at Roose. To his credit, Roose remains outwardly composed. This creature is no son of mine, Roose announces coldly to the assembly. Ramsay Snow, you are guilty of heinous crimes. I will see you hanged for this. He steps away from the Starks as if washing his hands of Ramsay. but Jon and the Great Jon Umber flank Roose, ensuring he cannot slip away either. Ramsay sees the writing on the wall. Like a cornered animal, he draws a dagger and presses it to Theon's throat, dragging the whimpering reek back against a pillar. "Back! Everyone back or I'll cut his throat!" Theon dies. "Not that anyone cares," he adds with a twisted laugh. It's a standoff amid the scorched remains of Winterfell's Hall. No one particularly cares for Theon at this point, but Robb, still honorable, signals his archers to hold fire for the moment. Catelyn steps forward, her voice dripping with contempt. "Ramsay Snow, you will release our father's ward and face the king's justice. If you do, your death will be quick." Ramsay just sneers. "I prefer slow deaths myself." He begins to press the blade, drawing a thin line of blood on Theon's neck. At that instant, a booming shout, "Winterfell!" From behind a collapsed wall, a massive figure charges. Hodor! Carrying none other than Bran Stark on his back. Bran, alive and very much present, had arrived at the edge of the scene with his companions, Mira and Jojen Reed, plus Hodor, just as Ramsay made his stand. They had been drawn by ghosts' howls and the sounds of the Stark army's approach. Now Bran, seeing his home and knowing his family is here, cannot stay away. At Bran's urging, gentle Hodor summoned a rare courage and stormed forward. He barrels into Ramsay like an enraged bull, enormous strength unleashed in defense of little Bran's home. Ramsay is knocked aside like a rag doll, losing his grip on both Dagger and Theon. Before Ramsay can recover, Grey Wind and Ghost both launch themselves at him, taking the bastard down in a flurry of teeth. Theon collapses to the ground, dazed and sobbing. It all happens in seconds. By the time Jon and Robb rush forward to restrain the direwolves, Ramsay Snow is a gory heap, dead and ripped to pieces, torn apart poetic justice by the Stark direwolves. Only a stunned silence follows, broken by Theon's hysterical whimpers and the crackle of remaining embers in Winterfell's ruins. Then, "Brother!" Bran's voice, full of joy, rings out. All eyes turn to the broken doorway where Hodor stands, Bran cradled on his back. Catelyn gasps as if seeing a ghost, tears immediately springing. "Bran, my sweet Bran!" Robb's face breaks into an astonished, radiant grin. Jon looks as if he beholds a miracle, smiling broader than we've ever seen, eyes glistening. Bran is alive, having survived thanks to the aid of the Reed siblings and others. Rickon too appears moments later, peeking nervously from behind Osha the wildling woman's skirts. They had been hiding outside until the fight ended. It turns into an emotional family reunion amidst the wreckage of their home. Catelyn embraces Bran and Rickon both, sobbing with relief, almost unable to believe they're real. Robb holds them too, laughing through tears. Jon ruffles Rickon's hair and kneels to hug Bran tightly, mindful of his broken body but overjoyed beyond words. Even the stern northern lords wipe away tears at the Stark children's unexpected return. It feels as though the old gods have given the Starks a gift in their darkest hour. Two sons thought dead are restored to them. In the aftermath, Roose Bolton is apprehended quietly by Stark loyalists, the evidence of his treason. Ramsay's slip, plus ravens found in his baggage from Casterly Rock promising him the title of Warden, is damning. Robb confronts Roose in what's left of Winterfell's courtyard. "How long have you been planning to betray us?" Robb asks, hurt and anger in his voice. Roose, ever calculating, sees no way out but tries one last gambit. "Your Grace, I did what I thought was best for the North. We were losing." "Enough!" Robb cuts him off, cold fury radiating. "You plotted to kill my family under guest right. There is no worse crime. For that, Roose Bolton is sentenced to die." And by the same code Ned Stark lived by, Robb carries out the sentence himself the next dawn. Roose is executed with ice, his head placed on a spike above Winterfell's gate next to the flayed skins he himself had once hung. A grim message to any who would betray the Starks. The Greyjoy pretenders are defeated, the Boltons brought to heel, and Winterfell, though in ruins, returns to Stark hands. There's poignant work to be done, burying the dead, salvaging what they can. Winterfell's people, those who survived or fled, slowly trickle back now that it's safe. They light small fires in the hearths that still stand, determined that Winterfell will not be a tomb but a home again. Yet, even as the Starks reclaim their dominion in the north and gather their strength, the true enemy is moving. The long night is coming. reports grow of the White Walkers advancing beyond the wall. The wildlings, now largely united under Tormund Giantsbane since Mance Rayder was captured by Stannis during the stalemate, have sent envoys to Winterfell, knowing that the Starks are not like Southern Kneelers, and desperate for help. One such envoy, a spear wife who once fought Jon, stands before the Stark court in Winterfell's Godswood beneath the Heart Tree. "The dead are coming," she says plainly, voice quavering only slightly. "Thousands. We saw them. The white shadows, with eyes bluer than ice." A hush falls. Many present glance uneasily. They've all heard whispers, but hearing it confirmed so starkly is chilling. King Robb, now reunited with all his siblings except Sansa, who's still effectively a hostage wife in KL, calls a council with his mother, Jon, Bran, who has begun having strange prophetic dreams of a three-eyed raven and the Night King, and his key lords. They realize that all their struggles against the Iron Throne or Ironborn will mean nothing if they don't unite against the army of the dead. Jon speaks up passionately. "We have to make peace with the wildlings and join forces. They're not our enemies, not now. Lord Greatjon Umber is reluctant. These wild folk killed my brother's son on the fist," he growls. But Tormund himself steps forward, having come with the envoys. We've fought each other for thousands of years, but we're breathing, and those things aren't. I say we put aside old hates and together send the dead back to their graves." The simple, bracing logic wins many over. Ravens fly to the wall, what's left of it, and beyond, coordinating a meeting. In a historic assembly at the wall's ruins, representatives of the Night's Watch remnants, led by acting Lord Commander Ed Tollett now, Stannis Baratheon, who is still at the wall, brooding and uncertain of his next move, the wildlings under Tormund, and the North's forces under Robb Stark all gather to discuss the defense against the dead. It's a scene unprecedented. Black brothers, free folk, Northern Knights, Baratheon bannermen, and even a Red Priestess, Melisandre, eyeing Bran and Rickon curiously as if sensing something in their blood. All huddled in furs around great fires at Castle Black's courtyard, as a brutal wind howls. Despite differences and old grudges, they come to an agreement. Stannis, humbled by Blackwater and convinced by Davos and Melisandre that the greater threat is here, agrees to support King Robb's efforts against the Walkers without demanding fealty for now. Stannis still styles himself King of Westeros, but he recognizes he cannot fight a war on two fronts. One against the dead, one against the living Starks. The pragmatic solution is alliance. Perhaps Melisandre has glimmered that the prince that was promised might in fact be among these Starks or Jon Snow, given the heroic, fate-marked path he's walked instead of being stuck at the wall. The combined forces move north of the wall. What is left of it? They establish a base at the Fist of the First Men, ironically, where the Watch was defeated. With Bran Stark's newfound abilities as a warg and budding greenseer, his gifts awakened faster perhaps due to never going to the Three-Eyed Raven's cave, but Jojen Reed still guided him somewhat and he touched a weirwood north of the wall that gave visions. The allies gain intelligence on the White Walkers' movements. Bran sometimes dreams through the eyes of ravens flying over the vast white wastes, seeing the columns of the undead moving like icy rivers through the forests. Finally, the army of the dead arrives, an endless tide of whites with glowing blue eyes, skeletal hands clutching rusted weapons, and towering in their midst, the pale, elegant horrors that are the White Walkers themselves, astride undead horses. Above them, the sky churns with unnatural storm clouds. The living have gathered every able fighter, Northmen alongside wildlings, Baratheon knights next to free folk raiders, giants, yes, a few giants remained from Tormund's crew, huffing in impatience with huge tree trunk clubs and even a couple of young dragons. In this scenario, perhaps we have a bit of Deus Ex Machina. Daenerys Targaryen, now with fully grown dragons and an army in Meereen, received pleas from Tyrion, who learned of the threat via Sansa's communications and Varys' whispers, and decides to aid against the White Walkers as a way to win Westeros' goodwill before she presses her claim. It might be too early for her arrival in a 6-0-minute scenario, but let's say one dragon Drogon appears unexpectedly circling above, or maybe not if we want to keep it Stark-centric. Perhaps better to keep it within Stark/North resources since it's about Jon not joining NW. So scrap Dany cameo. Instead, Samwell Tarly provides a crucial edge. From the dragonglass cache that Jon did not find, since he wasn't Lord Commander to send the mission, Sam nonetheless knew of the dragonglass at the Fist from Ghost. Ghost had earlier discovered a cache beyond the wall in Cannon and given some to Sam. The Allied forces have thus mined dragonglass from Dragonstone, courtesy of Stannis' knowledge, and distributed dragonglass weapons and the 2 Valyrian steel swords the North has. Ice reforged? Actually, ice was melted in Cannon to make 2 swords, but in our timeline, Tywin didn't get to melt it because he left it at KL or used it for something? With Tywin alive, maybe he hadn't melted it yet because he gave it as gift in Purple Wedding? Actually, timeline. After RW, Tywin melted ice into Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail. Here, RW never happened, so ice stayed with Robb the whole time. So ice is intact, as we saw Robb used it to execute Roose and kill Gregor. Great. So 1 Valyrian greatsword ice is with Starks. Jon still doesn't have Longclaw because Jor died and likely gave it to someone else or it's lost. But maybe Jor survived? Unlikely after mutiny. If Jor's body was recovered, Longclaw might be at the wall, perhaps given to Stannis or Jon by default for this battle. Let's say Jon ends up wielding Longclaw now, given by the Night's Watch in recognition of his leadership, Ed or others insisting he take it, since Jor wanted him to have it anyway originally. So Jon wields Longclaw, Valyrian steel, and Robb wields ice. The battle for the Dawn commences on the wind-swept plains beyond the wall. It is a battle unlike any other, living men screaming as they hack futilely at dead foes that feel no pain, giant ice spiders, the stuff of legend now real, skittering out of the darkness. Giants on our side bellowing as they tear whites limb from limb, Melisandre praying loudly in the tongue of Ashai, summoning gouts of flame from trenches to hold back swarms of undead. The White Walkers stride forward, and where they go, normal blades shatter from their enchanted frost, and men's eyes glaze with terror. But the living have their own champions. Jon Snow finds himself face to face with a walker in the heart of battle. The creature is tall, with hair like snow and eyes radiant blue, armor of strange crystal gleaming. It swings a freezing sword at Jon. Jon barely parries with Longclaw. Unlike normal steel, Valyrian steel holds firm, the clash ringing out with an unearthly timbre. The walker cocks its head, surprised to find a weapon that resists its power. They engage in a deadly dance. This is Jon's true test. All his experiences, fighting wildlings, leading men, battling Jaime's forces, enduring heartbreak, and forging bonds, have led to this moment at the end of the world. The walker moves with inhuman speed, but Jon moves with determination fueled by love for his family and people. A stroke of luck, or perhaps destiny. The walker slips on a patch of obsidian-studded earth, Drogon glass shards intentionally scattered like caltrops. It's a brief stumble, but enough. Jon pivots and brings Longclaw down in a mighty arc, shattering the White Walker's icy sword and cleaving its torso. With a horrific shriek, the other bursts apart in a spray of frost and shards, defeated. Around the battlefield, similar key moments occur. Tormund's axe hews through a white giant's leg. Brienne of Tarth, she came north too with Catelyn, determined to protect the Stark girls, and now fights for humanity, uses Oathkeeper. Jaime had given it to her before he left KL perhaps. In an act of faith, if that storyline can be inserted, to destroy another White Walker that had cornered a group of northern archers. Even Sansa contributes from afar. Though still in KL, she managed via Ravens and Littlefinger's help to persuade the Vale to send knights, who arrived just in time as surprise reinforcements, a nod to the Battle of the Bastards Eagles arriving late scenario. Led by young Robert Arryn's regent, the Knights of the Vale sweep in on the flank, their heavy cavalry pushing back a wave of whites threatening to encircle the northern forces. It's a grand coalition of all of Westeros's folk finally united. The climax comes when the Night King, if we borrow from the show, himself steps onto the field. He raises his arms and hundreds of fallen fighters, friend and foe, jerk back to their feet as undead, turning on the living. Despair sweeps through the ranks of the living at this cruel reversal. But then Bran Stark, who has been kept guarded in the rear, his gifts known to a few, decides to act. Bran, guided by the threads of fate, wargs into a flock of ravens and dive bombs the Night King, momentarily distracting him with pecking beaks and his icy blue eyes. The Night King's concentration wavers. Some of the newly risen whites collapse again without his active will sustaining them. The Night King bats the ravens away angrily, shattering Bran's consciousness out of them. Bran falls from his perch, unconscious from the psychic recoil, but the distraction provides an opening. King Robb Stark, on horseback, armed with ice, charges the Night King flanked by two direwolves, Ghost and Grey Wind, ever faithful. The Night King conjures a spear of pure ice and hurls it. It misses Robb but strikes Grey Wind in the side. With a mournful yelp, the valiant direwolf falls gravely wounded or dead. Robb cries out in fury and grief, but presses on, swinging ice in a wide arc. The ancient greatsword, once wielded by Ned, connects with the Night King's own icy staff. There is a flash of bright blue and red sparks as Valyrian steel meets White Walker magic. Both are thrown back by the Force. Robb hits the ground hard, dazed. The Night King stands over him, conjuring another ice blade to finish the young wolf. But Jon is there. Jon, covered in blood and soot, eyes blazing with determination, tackles the Night King from the side in the nick of time. The two roll across the snow. The Night King is physically strong. He hurls Jon off and tries to freeze him with a touch, but Jon grabs Longclaw from the ground and slashes desperately. The Valyrian steel slices through the Night King's armored arm. The ancient foe lets out a horrific scream unlike any heard before. Light cracks appear along his form, as if he's made of thin ice over deep water. Jon, pulling himself up, channels every last bit of strength and stabs Longclaw through the Night King's chest. With a final thunderous crack, the Night King shatters into 1,000 ice shards, dissolving into the wind. Instantly, every remaining wight on the battlefield collapses, lifeless once more. The Long Knight's heart has been pierced. Silence falls, broken only by the ragged breaths of the living and the whimpers of the wounded. Then astonished cheers rise. They have done it. The dead are defeated. Dawn breaks on the horizon, pale sunlight spilling over the bloodied snow as if reward from the gods. Jon helps Robb to his feet. The brothers embrace tightly, both shaking with relief and exhaustion. Ghost limps over, nuzzling Jon's hand. Grey Wind sadly did not survive the ice spear. Robb kneels by his fallen companion and whispers a goodbye, tears in his eyes, but knows Grey Wind's sacrifice saved him. The cost of victory is high. Many heroes lie among the fallen. Lady Mage Mormont died fighting a white giant, as did Lord Commander Ed of the Watch. Even Stannis Baratheon was mortally wounded, a heroic last stand with Lightbringer, Melisandre's enchantment, guarding a breach before a swarm of wights overran him. His death perhaps finally fulfilled some part of prophecy, or perhaps it was simply a valiant end to a contentious man. Regardless, the living have won. In the days that follow, a great pyre is built for all the dead, friend and foe, to prevent any wights from rising again. It is a somber, cathartic ceremony. At Winterfell, what remains of it, people assemble to thank the gods for deliverance. There is a deep sense of unity among those who survived. They truly consider each other brothers and sisters now, having faced death incarnate together. King Robb holds a gathering in Winterfell's Godswood, beneath the Heart Tree. Representatives from all regions are invited to come. A new pact is forged, the Pact of Winterfell, some will call it. In it, the North's independence is recognized by those present, including the Vale and Riverlands lords who came north. The Iron Throne's influence is greatly diminished after the war. King's Landing, hearing of the supernatural threats vanquishing, is in chaos. Joffrey was ironically poisoned by Olenna at his wedding during the lull, and now with Tywin's forces weakened by the fight in the north, Cersei is barely holding power with Tommen. But in truth, after seeing what they've seen, few care to continue the petty squabbles of thrones. Many Southerners simply bend the knee to King Robb willingly, grateful for Stark leadership during the crisis. It becomes something akin to the Great Council of the Surviving Lords. Yet Robb Stark surprises everyone at that meeting. He stands, with his crown of bronze and iron, and says, "We did not save our world just to resume fighting over crowns. The realm needs healing, not further division. I sought independence because we could not abide a tyrant, but now our true enemy is gone, and those who remain, we bled together. We are one people of Westeros when faced with extinction. Let us remember that." With that, Robb offers an unprecedented compromise. The North will accept a restoration of alliance with the South, not as subjects to a tyrant, but as equals in a new era of cooperation, provided the Iron Throne is occupied by a ruler chosen by consensus and bound by oath to never again mistreat the North. Effectively, Robb calls for a kind of confederation or elective monarchy, something to break the cycle of hatred. This is more generous than anyone expected from the king in the north. The lords assembled consider it. The Lannisters are greatly weakened. Tywin himself survived his retreat, but back in KL he died ignominiously on the privy after Tyrion, who escaped during the confusion of Joffrey's death, took vengeance. With Tywin and Joffrey gone, Tommen is a boy and in no position to lead the realm through such transformation. Some suggest Daenerys Targaryen, who by now has landed on Westeros shores with her dragons, maybe even participated in one skirmish against leftover whites in the Bite. Daenerys meets with Robb and finds him reasonable and honorable. She knows the North cannot be conquered by fire easily and is moved by the story of how they saved Westeros. Perhaps in a statecraft masterstroke, Daenerys and Robb agree to unite the realms by marriage between Jon Snow and Daenerys. Here's where Jon's true parentage could be revealed if desired. Bran, having green sight, pieces together the vision of Lyanna and Rhaegar at the Tower of Joy from his dreams. He tells Jon and Daenerys the truth. Jon is Aegon Targaryen, Rhaegar's legitimate son with Lyanna Stark. This shocks Jon to the core. He always thought himself a bastard, Ned's son, but now learns he has a claim to the Iron Throne arguably stronger than Dany's. Jon, however, doesn't care for claims or thrones. He openly states he bends the knee to Daenerys' better claim if it avoids further conflict. Daenerys, for her part, is impressed by Jon's character and lineage. Ice and fire united. The two have developed mutual respect, maybe even affection, if they've spent time meeting at Winterfell. With Robb's support, they propose a dual leadership. Daenerys will take King's Landing and restore peace in the south, while the north remains under Stark governance, but as allies. Jon, carrying both Stark and Targaryen blood, becomes a living bridge between the two worlds. In a grand ceremony in the spring at the rebuilt God's Eye, under the Isle of Faces, chosen symbolically as it's where the original pact between the Children of the Forest and the First Men was signed, Jon Snow, or Aegon Targaryen, weds Daenerys Targaryen. The new Queen Daenerys recognizes Robb Stark as Lord of the North and Protector of the Realms of Men for his leadership in the Long Night, effectively letting the North remain self-governed but allied. Sansa Stark, freed from her unwanted marriage since Tyrion gallantly set her aside after his escape, and with no Lannisters objecting now, becomes Lady of Winterfell in title, while Robb focuses on broader realm issues. Arya Stark, who had returned from her travels in time to fight in the battle for Dawn, perhaps she saved Gendry's life or something, fulfilling her own journey, decides she's had enough of war and death and helps rebuild Winterfell's people. Though ever the lone wolf, she eventually travels west to explore once peace settles. Bran Stark survives but chooses to disappear north of the Wall with whatever remaining magic, perhaps to become the new Three-Eyed Raven fully since the last one died, continuing to guard against any future threats. In King's Landing, the Iron Throne is melted down by dragonfire on Daenerys' orders, to symbolize the end of the brutal old system. Instead, she and Jon, when in the capital, sit on seats made from weirwood and steel, a fusion of old and new. Tyrion Lannister emerges from hiding to serve as Daenerys' hand, bringing his political savvy to complement her justice and mercy. As the sun sets on our alternate saga, the camera pans over a rebuilt Winterfell bustling with life once more. The Stark children, those who remain, together in the courtyard laughing, Ghost playing with a pack of stray dogs, statues of Ned and Catelyn in the crypts with fresh flowers laid by Sansa, and on the highest tower, King Robb Stark stands with Jon Snow. The two brothers looking out over their homeland. They remember all they lost. Father, friends, direwolves, but also all they saved. Never thought we'd see peace truly, Robb says softly. Jon smiles faintly. We earned it. And if anyone tries to take it away again, they'll hear the howls of the wolves, Robb finishes, clapping Jon on the shoulder. In the Godswood, the heart tree's red leaves rustle, as if in agreement. The night is no longer so dark, and it is full of promise rather than fear. That's our theory of what might have happened if Jon Snow never joined the Night's Watch. By staying with his family, Jon helped prevent disasters like the Red Wedding and led the fight that saved Westeros from the dead. It's a hopeful vision of how loyalty, honor, and unity could triumph over chaos and darkness. Westeros is a land filled with endless possibilities and stories waiting to be told, and we love exploring them all. If you enjoyed this journey through an alternate Song of Ice and Fire, please remember to like this video, share it with fellow theorists, and subscribe to our channel for more epic tales and deep dives into your favorite series. Valar Morghulis, but as we've seen today, together, Valar Dohaeris. All men must serve, and when we stand together, we can even conquer death.